And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome aboard. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service in Alaska region, and this is your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on this Thursday, November 7th, 2024. We start out with the sea ice. The ice is just gradually growing here across the Beaufort Sea coastline, down along the Chukchi Sea and even into Norton Sound. Just overall colder temperatures. We're going to see a trend toward colder temperatures continuing later this weekend into next week as high pressure just kind of gradually, slowly builds across the northern and central interior. This will allow temperatures, especially in some of the normally cold interior regions, to get down below zero, and this will again just cause the ice to further develop and expand southward. Looking at the weather map as of late this Thursday night and early Friday morning, we have an area of low pressure just east of Kodiak Island. This low will just continue to gradually fill and weaken as we go through Friday into early Saturday. The frontal system, they'll continue to push northward and weaken. Still could be some light to moderate snow in the northern panhandle through mid-evening, where a winter weather advisory is in effect for areas of the Haines and Klondike highways, especially the higher elevations above Haines and Skagway. As we look further south and west, low pressure collected southwest of the Aleutians. That'll be the next weather system to be coming out of the North Pacific. Otherwise, over the weekend, still some breezy conditions here along areas of the Chukchi Sea coastline, especially vicinity of Point Hope up to Cape Lisburne and Point Lay. Gusty winds there could still cause some areas of blowing snow. So by Friday afternoon, central pressure of this low comes up to 991 millibars. Still some breezy conditions though around it, especially pulling back here toward the lower portion of Cook Inlet, Shelikof Strait. Low pressure by the time we get Saturday will already have moved out from south of the Aleutians to well south of Kodiak Island. This low will come a little further north and eastward, kind of riding right along the lower Gulf North Pacific interface. And there'll be some lighter areas of snow or snow showers and rain showers right along the immediate coast as this will keep some precipitation going here into the weekend. As far as for Friday, winds will be out of the south-southeast for the inner channels, and some gusts to 35 knots Stevens Passage, where waves run 4 feet, 4-foot waves there, Lynn Canal. Down here, though, outside Dixon entrance outside of Metlakatla, maybe as high as 10-12 feet. Otherwise, for the outer coast, winds will be southerly to 20 knots with 17-foot swells, Gustavus down through Craig. As we get up toward Yakutat Bay, southeast to east winds 20 knots to Cape Suckling with 16, 17-foot waves. For Saturday, south-southeast winds around 10 knots across the inner channels, 2-3-foot waves there within Lynn Canal, maybe a foot or two there, Stevens Passage, and 5 to 7-foot waves down here through Dixon Entrance. Look for south to southeast winds at 10 to 15 knots south of Sitka, and then those winds just go more easterly offshore flow as we go Sitka northward to outside of Gustavus and Yakutat Bay, and maybe as strong as 30 knots there in the vicinity of Cape Suckling. Waves generally right around 12 feet on Saturday. For Friday, across the northwestern Gulf, east winds 25 knots within the wider expanse of Prince William Sound. Southeast winds to 25 knots outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance with waves as high as 12 to 15 feet. We'll have 30-knot northerly winds there, Anchor Point down through Kamishak Bay, the entrance of Cook Inlet, with 6-7-foot waves for Friday. And then on Saturday, easterly winds there within Prince William Sound, 20 knots, 3-4-foot waves. Outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance, southeast winds to 25 knots, 8 to 9-foot waves. Lower Cook Inlet, again from around Anchor Point down through Kennedy Entrance, northeast winds to 25 knots with 5 to 6-foot waves. Areas around Kodiak Island, northwest winds on Friday to 25 knots, 10-foot waves east of Kodiak Island. As we drop down across the Alaska Peninsula, generally westerly winds 20 to 25 knots, waves 4 to 6 feet on the North Pacific side, 5 feet coming in the outer areas of Bristol Bay to as high as 8 to 10 feet to north of Cold Bay. And then for Saturday, with that second low coming up, passing still well south of the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, we expect Winds to turn around more southeast to easterly across Kodiak Island at 25 to 30 knots. And then there will be some 35-knot gales on the periphery of this low circulation on the North Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula. Waves could be running 8 to as high as 10, 14 feet off of Sand Point and Chicknick. And then more of a north-northwest wind to 30 knots there out of Bristol Bay and to the north side of Cold Bay, with waves 6 to as high as 11 feet there outside of Cold Bay. And across the Aleutians, winds initially southwesterly 30 knots, far eastern Aleutians around on Alaska. But as we get west of there, Nikolsky to Atka into the middle Aleutians and all the way back toward Kiska, with that low passing south, there's enough stronger circulation that we could see east to northeast gales to 40 knots and some higher seas upwards of 15 to near 20 feet, especially the central Aleutians. By Saturday, as the low pulls up to well south of Kodiak Island in the Alaska Peninsula, winds just go northerly. Eastern Aleutians, northwesterly, winds to 35-knot gales. And waves running 10 to 17 feet there through the eastern Aleutian chain. Those winds fall off and then become more westerly to 25 knots west of Adak rather. And then between Kiska and Shemya, southwest winds to 25 knots. Along the southwest coast, winds will be northwesterly 15 knots within Kuskokwim Bay and Bristol Bay. Northwest 20 knots, St. Matthew down to St. Paul. Waves 7 to 8 feet there. And then easterly winds out of Norton Sound to 25 knots with 4-foot waves here in that wider expanse. Northeast to north winds 15 knots as we drop down along the Yukon coast to the north side of Nunavik Island. And then on Saturday, winds will be northeasterly out of Bristol and Kuskokwim Bays. We expect northeast winds 10 to 15 knots out of Norton Sound and along the lower Yukon coast. And then westerly winds 20 knots, St. Matthew, northwest winds to 30 knots in the Pribilovs, with waves there as high as 8 to 10 feet. As we come up to the Bering Strait, winds will be northeasterly 20 to 25 knots, waves 4 or 5 feet, especially there toward the north side of St. Lawrence Island. There is kind of a tighter pressure gradient here on the west end of the Brooks Range North Slope interface. We're expecting easterly gales to 35 knots, Wainwright down through Point Hope, with waves as high as 6 to 9 feet here in that middle part of the Chukchi Sea. Otherwise, easterly winds along the Beaufort Sea coast, Utqiagvik through Kaktovik at 25 knots with waves around 5 feet. And there could be some areas of heavier freezing spray along the coast where you do have open water. And then on Saturday, easterly winds 20 to 25 knots, Kaktovik through Utqiagvik, but still 30-knot winds holding up Wainwright down to Cape Lisburn. And as you get out there more toward the open waters of the Chukchi Sea, waves 6 feet or so, and there still could be areas of heavier freezing spray. As we drop on down through the Bering Strait, look for east to northeast winds, generally 15 to maybe 20 knots there out of Kotzebue Sound. And then as we slip south of the Bering Strait, generally look for northeast winds off of Wales to the north side of St. Lawrence Island at 10 to 15 knots, with waves generally running on Saturday 2 to 4 feet.